writing. I don't know how many of you noticed as you came into the classroom, but there was this suitcase. I like to call this our creative inhibition baggage. It's all the stuff that we've brought to the class. Well, I'd like us to leave it at the door. So what do I want you to leave at the door? Low self-esteem. In here, we're all wonderful, so we don't have low self-esteem. Shyness. When I call on you, you're going to speak up. You're going to shout it out to the world. Last one. Fear of failure. Again, we're not going to fail in this class. We're all great writers. We have wonderful ideas, and we've left our inhibitions at the door. Did you give me the clicker? I'm ready for the lights. I sort of use as the premise for writing this quote by Rachel Carson, who says, "One way to open your eyes is to ask yourself, what if I had never seen this before? And what if I knew I would never see it again?" I use that as sort of our mantra for the class. As Michael told you, his father influenced him a lot. This is a picture of my grandmother. That happens to be my younger brother. He didn't have much influence on my life at all. And this is where I grew up. I grew up in central Illinois. It's between Bloomington and Peoria. My grandmother used to live in Chillicothe. That's where she grew up. And then they settled, her and my grandfather lived in Emden, and we have a centennial farm. But what about my grandmother was every time she came to our house, she would take us to the woods. The woods is just across the road here where we live, which was really just a glorified cow pasture. My grandmother never wore pants, but she always had an apron with pockets. Oh, and in those pockets would go the most wonderful things. The nuts, the leaves, anything we would pick up. We'd come back to the house, and she'd weave wonderful stories about the things she had picked up and about the things we saw. And a lot of times she'd make up a song or two. When I graduated from college, my grandmother gave me money to buy my first 35mm camera. Again, that way then I would continue to explore. Well, in the early 80s, my grandmother had a stroke. She was no longer able to go out into the woods to explore, and I felt, using the Rachel Carson quote, that I wanted to show my grandmother what I was experiencing, so I started writing letters to her about everything I was seeing and just different things. So that's how I got started, and I owe a lot to my grandmother. What do? Most of the time you're going to see me with a 3x5 notebook. You might consider part of the class an infomercial for the 3x5 notebook. This is part of my collection. I have, I think, 9 or 10 boxes of these notebooks. These are my first years. And as you can see on this side, maybe one notebook a year. Didn't really put too much detail, just where I was, what I saw. These white sheets, those are pages that tell me where I went. So it'll say like maybe April 4th, Bellsmith Springs, April 5th, Hayes Creek Canyon, just so I can find the items. And I brought a box to show everybody, so I'll put that back on the demonstration table after I'm finished. How do I use these notebooks? To me, my notebooks, my 3x5 notebook, is the foundation for my writing. I do a lot of writing for the Illinois Steward magazine. The example that people have, this one with the yellow lady slippers, we did an article called Prairie Journal. And so we talk about the different types of prairie, and each beginning is a page from, or a piece from one of my notebooks. We wrote the book Illinois Wilds. Again, just using my notes helped me begin my chapters. Before Michael and I had written the book Illinois Wilds, I didn't do much writing at all. So I have a lot to credit Michael in getting us started. And again, my notes were just invaluable. And I have an example of, I had the book Illinois Wilds over on the back table. Perhaps, though, the biggest project I've undertaken where my 3x5 notebooks came in handy were my contracts with Human Kinetics for my hiking books, Hiking Illinois, and then the second edition, which came out last spring. It's great to write a book. I mean, it's, I guess, an ego trip. Wow, I've got a book on the shelf. But what you don't understand is the contract. And Human Kinetics is used to working with wrestling coaches, track coaches, football coaches, not the natural world. So the first contract I received, it was for October through August. I was to hike, write, and have a manuscript turned in within those 9 months. This last one, we received the contract, at least got to hike in summer and fall, and again, the book was due in February. Summer is not the best time to hike in Illinois. It's hot, humid, you really don't see a lot. But thanks to my 3x5 notebooks, I'd been to most of the places in the spring. I'd been to a lot of them in the fall. I knew what we were going to see. I even did a lot of the hikes in the winter. I knew what spring flowers were blooming. I knew what organisms were there. Because in addition to information about the state or about those trails, it's like I'm hiking with you. So I give details about the hike and what you might see. So it's sort of like having Sue guide you through these trails. So my 3x5 notebooks, I would not have survived. And recently I received a call from a woman in Ohio. And they've asked her to undertake this project. And she asked me, well, how did you do this? And I said, I've been doing these trails for 10, 15 years, and I have all these notes. And then all she said was, oh. She had 2 children, or 1 baby on the way. She just had a child, and she had nothing to begin with. So I'm not sure whether or not she took the project. But it's, to me, they're just, I can't get over, stress enough how invaluable my notebooks are. And I record everything. So what is communicating nature or visual observation? It's my observations, it'll be your perceptions, and it's images. It is the details. It's the details that's going to bring your writing to life. It can be in the form of just something simple as a list. You know, when things are blooming, what you're seeing, a little sketch. It can even be a poem. It can be anything to help you remember the day, the time, the place that you were at. As Michael said, we're not alone. Lewis and Clark, as Thomas Jefferson said, you will journal. They had 9 men on the trip that journaled. They were called the writingest crew on record. And from that, though, it spurred on the Go West young man. When people saw what they had written, they were curious and they wanted to see things too. Charles Darwin, copious notes. He had a journal of over 700 pages. He never strayed. He had the day, the time, the title, same handwriting. And this is how some of his discoveries were documented, was through his notes. He said his biggest regret was that he did not learn how to draw well. And then we have Anne Zwinger. She's sort of a contemporary. I have several of her books. This one is entitled Wind in the Rock. She's a very descriptive writer. It's just like you're there in the Southwest with her as she talks. Michael does not like to read her. He said it's too detailed. But I think it's great. And then we have Aldo Leopold. We will mention Aldo Leopold quite a bit. He's from Wisconsin. He was a professor, a forestry professor, probably best known for his land and conservation ethic, and he's the author of Sand County Almanac, which was published after he died. He kept a notebook. He had it with him at all times. This is his final notebook. You can notice, I want you to notice the burned edges. He had a heart attack putting out a neighbor's grass fire. This is his final notebook. And Sand County Almanac was not written in this notebook, but the information from the notebook became part of Sand County Almanac. He talks about the geese, the lilac shoots, some pileated woodpeckers, just several different things. I just thought this was a powerful piece when the people in Wisconsin told me about it. Have you ever heard anybody say, oh man, why did I waste all my time keeping notes? Well, most of the time, no. This gentleman's name is Peter Kastner. He has seen over 8,000 species of birds. I mean, his goal is to be one of the top 5 birders. He's been all over the world, and he says, I love the adventure, but I have found that many of the details aren't things that I recall. I've missed so much of my life that it will never be recaptured. This was from an interview in Backpacker magazine when they asked him, well, did you keep notes? What do you have? All he has is a check mark by that bird's name, and that's it. What is our biggest roadblock to doing this? Why don't we do it? That comes back to some of our creative baggage. Fear. We're afraid that it's not going to sound right, it doesn't look good, nobody's going to like it. All you're doing this for is yourself. So you should not have any fear whatsoever. I'm a big mail order person, love the mail order, and on one of the mail order bags I got was this quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, you must do the thing you cannot do. Well, that got me to thinking, we've been doing this class for several years. I want a sketch journal in the worst way. I feel that if I buy the best supplies, that somehow they will come out of my bag and they will sketch journal for me. For my birthday recently, Michael gave me a gift of art lessons from a local art instructor. So, I'm trying. This is one of my first journal pages. It's from the cache. It's pretty simple, and I like to work small, very small. And I only do things usually in pieces, because I feel then at least maybe I got part of the shape right. So this is one of my pages from my sketch journal. And then here is how I used my 3x5 notebook. So see, I've written bluebirds, glints of the blue sky. What comes to mind is Leopold's out blew all other birds. So I've written that over there. And then here at the bottom, I have icicles at the large sandstone drip lines. And so then I drew this. I was out in the field, and you'll notice here I have the date, where I was, the time, and then when I got back to my hotel room, that's when I did my sketch journal. I'm one that I go out in the field, I do a lot of observations, I make a lot of notes, and then I'll come back and do things. So what is the magic bullet? What is it that's going to get us? What's going to make us so good at this? Fortunately, it comes down to practice. Practice, practice, practice. Again, not very good at practicing. I used to play the flute. My mom would set the timer and I'd have to practice for a half an hour. I usually had to go to the bathroom sometime during that half hour and I'd run into the kitchen and turn the timer so it looked like I'd practiced. I never got very good on the flute. But again, it's practice, and I am practicing, Michael, I'm practicing a little with my drawing, but I am practicing. So, how do we begin? Most people can recognize appropriate descriptive words, but they cannot generate them. That's what we're going to talk about the rest of the day, is how can we generate some words? There's lots of words out there. And in fact, every writer has a toolbox. And instead of regular tools, writers' tools are words, imagination, and love of books. Ralph Fletcher writes a lot of books for kindergarten through about 3rd grade instructors. And I just love some of the techniques he uses and his philosophy. So you'll see a lot of Ralph's books. So what kind of supplies do you need? Pretty simple, 3x5 notebook and a pen. And if you look at your little packet that has a career on it, I have given everybody a 3x5 notebook. I have started you on your way to documentation. What are some of the other things you might want? A thesaurus, a dictionary. And when Michael